Why was she the only one not looking at the map? The rest of the room was crowded with men, sunburned faces, sleeves rolled, eyes scanning the satellite image projected on the plywood wall. But she just stared through it, like she was seeing something the rest couldn't, something underneath. Her name was Staff Sergeant Ellery Madsen, 28 years old, 10th Mountain Division, deployed 4 months to eastern Afghanistan. To most of the base, she was just another sniper, quiet, precise, efficient. But there was a weight about her that no one could quite name. A silence that didn't feel like shyness. It felt like distance, the kind people carry after they've already lost too much. Captain Riker was talking fast, tapping his pen against the valley's contours on the map. 3 ambushes here, 6 weeks apart. Same kill zone. Our convoys move through every other Thursday, and every time they hit us with near-perfect timing. Someone's calling shots for them, someone trained. He looked up. Ellery didn't move. She didn't blink. The captain continued. Intel says the enemy commander's not just local, possibly Russian-trained, maybe even ex-military. He's running coordinated sniper teams. 11 Americans killed in 2 months. This man is not a farmer with a gun. He's a professional. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone cursed under his breath. Someone else asked for air support, drones, anything. But Ellery just kept staring at the ridgelines, quiet. Her gray eyes traced the light and shadow in the satellite image like she could feel the terrain under her fingertips. Riker turned to her. Madsen, you've been through that sector, thoughts? She blinked once, slow. Then her voice, soft, level, cut through the noise. Has anyone looked at moon phase, time of day, pattern of engagement? The captain frowned. Intel did, nothing consistent. Another soldier laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Staff Sergeant Pewitt. Big man, broad shoulders, the type who measured worth in decibels. We don't need another math problem, he said. We need more boots on the ground. Ellery didn't answer him. She just said quietly, I'll take the reports, all of them. When the briefing ended, she didn't head to the chow tent or the range. She walked to her corner of the base, a dim plywood room that smelled of oil and sand. She spread the mission reports across the floor like puzzle pieces, every ambush, every engagement. Then she pulled out something the Army didn't know she carried, a leather notebook, worn soft from years of use. The handwriting inside was tight, methodical, mathematical. Notes on wind vectors, kill patterns, human behavior. The name on the first page, Colin Hale. Her stepfather. Her teacher. Her ghost. He had been a sniper, one the Army never talked about. The kind whose record didn't exist, though every veteran of a certain era seemed to whisper about him. They called him the Ghost. Not because he vanished, but because his enemies did. He'd raised Ellery in rural Oregon, on a patch of land surrounded by forest and silence. Her father died when she was 6. Her mother remarried 2 years later. Colin Hale never talked much. He didn't smile often. But when he did, it was when she hit something she wasn't supposed to. He taught her to shoot before she learned to drive. He said rifles don't lie, people do. He taught her wind by watching dust. Taught her distance by comparing trees. Taught her calm by sitting still for hours, breathing with the rhythm of the earth. He said anyone can shoot, but being a sniper, that's about patience. It's about fear. You don't control the trigger, you control time. And then he was gone. The Army said heart attack. But even then, Ellery didn't believe them. She found things, letters, coded notes, lists of coordinates, things no civilian should have had. And a rifle, an M24 with a rebarreled action and a single name carved under the stock. Ghost. She enlisted a year later. Every bullet she fired, every breath she took in a scope, she did it his way. And though no one said his name anymore, she carried his lessons like armor. Now, in the dim tent at Combat Outpost Herrera, she opened his journal again. And she started mapping. Hours passed. The generator outside coughed. The base dogs barked at something in the dark. Ellery barely noticed. Every line she drew connected something invisible: the timing of attacks, moonlight cycles, convoy schedules, terrain gradients. By 4 a.m., the map looked alive, full of intersecting arcs and color-coded dots. And then she saw it. He wasn't random. He was rotating. 5 sniper nests across 3 valleys, shifting in rhythm with moonlight and convoy routes. A perfect pattern of movement. Predictable. He just didn't know she'd found him. She sat back, breathing slow, the way Colin used to. Her pulse was steady, but her thoughts weren't. She could almost hear his voice again, the same lesson he drilled into her every time she started doubting. The hardest part of waiting is convincing yourself the silence means nothing's happening. It's always happening, Elle. You just can't see it yet. She closed the notebook and field stripped her rifle by touch. Metal whispered in her hands. Every part slid into place with the precision of ritual. The weapon wasn't just a tool anymore. It was memory, it was legacy. Outside, dawn began to creep over the mountains. A soft gray that turned the ridgelines gold. Her hands didn't shake, they never did. She wasn't after vengeance. She wasn't after glory. She was after a truth she'd been chasing her whole life, that maybe, somewhere in all this death, there was still meaning left. When Captain Riker arrived that morning, bleary-eyed and holding a mug of instant coffee, she was already waiting by the map wall. "I found him," she said. He blinked. "Found who?" "The commander, the sniper calling the shots. He's cycling through 5 ridgelines. Next ambush window 72 hours from now, near the supply route that runs through Sh Joy Valley." Riker frowned. "That's not confirmed." "Nothing in war ever is," she said softly. "But if we're going to stop him, that's where he'll be." Pewitt leaned against the wall, scoffing. "You're going to drag a team into the mountains because of a hunch." Ellery looked at him, calm, cold. "People are already dying for nothing," she said. "At least let them die trying to change that." There was a long silence. Then Riker nodded. "All right," he said, "you get your team." That night Ellery packed light. Rations, ammo, spotting glass. Her rifle, the M2010, fine-tuned, matte black, balanced for her touch. She'd memorized the terrain, the routes, the angles of the sun. And deep in her rucksack, under layers of gear, the old M24 Collins rifle lay wrapped in canvas. She never brought it on missions. But tonight she wanted it close. The helicopter insertion came silent and sharp, blades cutting through the thin mountain air. Corporal Hayes was her spotter, young, nervous, with the kind of respect people show when they don't know what else to say. The rest of the security team moved light, breathing through masks against the dust. They landed 3 kilometers out. No light, no noise, just the sound of boots on stone. For 8 hours, they climbed through shale and dust in silence. Every step was deliberate, every sound measured. Hayes whispered, "You think he knows we're coming?" Ellery didn't answer. She just glanced at the horizon. "He thinks he's alone up here, that's enough." They reached the overwatch point just before dawn, a natural outcrop that overlooked the narrow road twisting through the valley below. From there, you could see everything. Convoy route, ridgelines, approach angles. It was perfect. Too perfect. They dug in. And waited. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, a patrol rolled through, drew scattered rifle fire. Nothing serious. But Ellery didn't relax. She could feel it, the stillness before the rhythm changed. Then on the 3rd day, the wind shifted. A low breeze from the west, carrying sand and faint static. Hayes froze mid-scan. "Movement," he whispered. Ellery slid beside him, scope up. Across the valley, 870 meters out, two figures emerged on the opposite ridge. One with a rifle, one spotting. They moved with precision. Not like locals. Like soldiers. The older one settled behind the rifle, body angled, legs tucked, position tight and deliberate. Ellery watched him for 30 seconds. And her stomach turned. She knew that stance. She'd seen it before in Oregon dirt, under pine trees, a lifetime ago. It was Colin. She exhaled slowly. Steady. Unblinking. Wind 6 to 8 west, Hayes said. Range 870. Ellery adjusted her scope. Sun behind her. Target silhouetted. No margin for error. Her heartbeat slowed. Once every second. Then slower. Like time itself was holding its breath. Both men leaned forward at the same time, the spotter adjusting his glass, the shooter aligning. For 2 seconds they were aligned. Two silhouettes. One line of fire. Ellery pressed the trigger. The shot cracked through the air like thunder. The first man, the spotter, dropped instantly. She cycled the bolt, fired again. Second man. Center mass. Silence. Dust lifted, shimmered. Then stillness. Through the headset faint static crackled and then a voice, strained, foreign. "You're her." Then nothing. Hayes stared. What did he just say? Ellery didn't answer. She just kept her scope on the ridge, watching the dust settle around two bodies that would never move again. They found the notebook an hour later. English handwriting. Maps. Convoy schedules. Sniper positions. And a list of names, one of them Colin Hale. Ellery didn't speak for a long time. The others thought it was shock. But she wasn't shocked. She was remembering. Colin once told her, when you take the right shot, the world goes quiet, but sometimes what you hit doesn't stay buried. Now she knew what he meant. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the silence of the mountains, she began to wonder. What if the man she'd killed wasn't just her enemy? What if he'd been looking for the same ghost she'd been chasing all her life? Why did her hands feel heavier when she cleaned the rifle this time? The mission was over, 2 targets down, no casualties. By the book, it was perfect. But when Ellery sat alone in the operation's tent hours later, the silence didn't feel like victory. It felt like waiting for something that hadn't happened yet. Outside, the base was alive again, generators humming, distant laughter from the mechanics, radio static blending with desert wind. Inside, only the faint sound of her hands moving metal on cloth, slow and deliberate. She cleaned the rifle the same way Colin had taught her. Every bolt, every spring, wiped until the steel caught no light at all. Hayes walked in and froze at the door. He looked too young under the flickering bulb, sweat-streaked face, dirt on his cheek, the kind of exhaustion that wasn't from running, but from knowing what a bullet could do. "Ma'am," he said softly, holding out something, "they told me to give this to you." A sealed evidence bag, inside a notebook, the same one they'd found beside the body. Ellery stared at it. The weight of it felt wrong, like gravity had shifted around that little rectangle of paper and ink. She took it, set it on the table, and didn't touch it again for a long time. Hayes hesitated. "Intel says he was Russian, Spetsnaz maybe, taught local insurgents how to shoot like us." Ellery nodded but said nothing. "They said he had your stepfather's name written down, Colin Hale." She looked up. Her gray eyes caught the flickering light, dull and calm. "Yeah," she said quietly, "I know." Hayes shifted. "Was he?" "Don't ask," she interrupted. "Not tonight." He stood there, awkward and half lost, then nodded and left. The flap closed and the sound of the wind returned. Ellery sat back and let the air settle around her. She could feel her heart beating slower now, not from calm but from focus. When she finally opened the notebook, the smell of old paper and oil hit her familiar, almost identical to Colin's journal. Same structure, same symbols, same shorthand for wind and range and elevation. Except these pages weren't about Afghanistan. They started 20 years earlier. The first line, Chechnya, 1999. She turned the pages slowly. Sketches of valleys, positions, kill counts. Then names, American names, Russian, unmarked. And then she found it, a page folded and nearly torn from overuse. A single entry written in careful English. Find the ghost, kill the ghost. Underneath, another line shakier, almost an afterthought. If not him, the one who carries his rifle. Her breath caught. She didn't move for a long time. Soft cinematic pause, background hum lowers, tone grows introspective. Later, during debrief, she sat across from two intelligence officers. Both wore clean uniforms, no dust, no fatigue, the kind of soldiers who fought with pens, not rifles. They asked their questions with precision. Range, wind, target movement. She gave them the answers, all of them. But when one of them, a major with a clipped accent, asked, "How did you predict the enemy's position?" she just said, "Pattern." He frowned, "Pattern." "Everything has one," she replied. "You just have to stop looking at the noise." They scribbled notes, exchanged glances. Then came the question she'd been waiting for. "Who taught you to analyze patterns like that?" She hesitated, not out of fear, but because part of her didn't want to share what little was still hers. But eventually, she said the name anyway. Colin Hale. The room went still. The officers looked at each other, then excused themselves. When they came back, one of them carried a folder. Stamped sensitive. Old creased, sealed until now. "Sergeant," the major said, sliding it across the table, "you might want to see this." Ellery didn't open it right away. She waited until she was back in her bunk, the lights low, her breath shallow. When she finally peeled it open, she saw his photo first, younger in uniform, eyes sharp even in black and white. Hale Colin A. Below it, a service record. Decorated sniper, multiple deployments, operations classified. But then the lines that followed made her chest tighten. Investigated for unauthorized engagements. Accused of independent operations, outside command authority. No charges filed, dismissed quietly. She kept reading. Rumors, ghost stories, field accounts of a sniper who moved between units, eliminating high-value targets before orders came down. Some called him a savior. Others a liability. But every report ended the same way. Subject Hale considered highly lethal, unaccounted for. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from something deeper, disappointment that felt almost like betrayal. Colin had always told her patience was a weapon, that silence was strength, that truth came slow if at all. He never told her this, that his silence had been enforced, not chosen. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains, a storm rare in these parts. She closed the folder and stared at the ceiling of the tent, rain tapping against the canvas like distant gunfire. She didn't cry, but she also didn't sleep. The next morning, Captain Riker found her at the range before dawn. She was sitting on a crate, her rifle across her knees, staring at the distant horizon where the storm had cleared. "You should be resting," he said. "I don't rest well," she replied. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Intel confirmed the Russian's identity. Former Spetsnaz marksman, name's Anton Baranov. Been training insurgent snipers here for 2 years. He was linked to at least 30 coalition deaths. Ellery didn't react, and the notebook. Riker sighed. It matches your stepfather's field style. Baranov had been tracking him for decades. We think Hale killed Baranov's brother during a classified op in Chechnya. That's why he had your stepfather's name. When Hale died, Baranov started targeting anyone who might have been connected to him, until he found you. The words fell heavy, one after another like stones. Ellery looked down at the rifle in her lap, her rifle, his rifle, and felt the quiet hum of something she couldn't name. It wasn't pride. It wasn't grief. It was something between the two. So, she said finally, I was his closure. Riker hesitated. You were his mistake. Music shift, slow piano, low strings, reflective tone. Back in her tent, she unpacked the old M24, the one Colin had left her. She ran her fingers over the barrel, over the faint scratches near the stock where the name Ghost was carved. She remembered the first time she'd held it, small hands barely strong enough to shoulder the weight. Colin standing behind her, correcting her grip, whispering, Don't fight the wind. Listen to it. He said every shot told a story, but not all stories deserve to be told. And now, years later, she finally understood what he meant. She cleaned the rifle again, though it didn't need cleaning. Then she wrapped it back in cloth and tucked it away. Some ghosts didn't need to be carried anymore. But others never left. 3 days later, she was summoned back to headquarters, a commendation review. Bronze Star with Valor device, standard paperwork, speeches, photo ops. She didn't want any of it. Still, she went. In the small ceremony, officers she'd never met stood in neat rows, polished and rehearsed. Someone read her citation aloud, calm voice, words like heroism, decisive action, extraordinary composure under fire. She stood still, eyes forward. None of it felt real. When they pinned the medal on her uniform, applause filled the room. But all she heard was wind. And Colin's voice faint, like an echo through time. The shot is never about glory. It's about silence, what you save by taking it. Afterward, she stepped outside, away from the noise. The sun was sharp, the air thin. She took off her cap and looked up at the ridges beyond the wire. They seemed almost peaceful now. Hayes found her there, hands in his pockets, awkward as always. You okay? She nodded. Yeah, just thinking. About him. About all of it, she said. About what it costs to be good at something you wish you weren't good at. Hayes didn't answer. He just stood there beside her, watching the mountains. Finally, she said, You know what Colin used to tell me? He shook his head. That fear's not your enemy, it's your mirror, shows you what still matters. She looked down at her hands, the faint oil stains that never washed away. I'm still afraid, she said softly. Hayes smiled. Maybe that's what keeps you human. That night, long after lights out, she wrote in her own notebook for the first time in months. Fear is memory, memory is weight, but silence is where the truth hides until we're strong enough to face it. She paused, then added a second line. He wasn't hunting me. He was trying to finish a story my stepfather left unfinished. Then she closed it, tucked it away beside the old one, and finally, for the first time since the mission, let herself sleep. But even in dreams, the words wouldn't leave her. You're her. And somehow, they didn't sound like accusation anymore. They sounded like acknowledgement. Why was she being reassigned so soon? The war had its own rhythm, and Ellery had learned long ago that peace never lasted longer than the sound of paperwork hitting a desk. 2 weeks after the ceremony, she was called back to Operations Command. New orders. New sector. Same silence. When she walked into the briefing room, she noticed the stares first, a few respectful, a few wary. She had a reputation now, the sniper who'd killed the ghost hunter, the woman whose bullet ended a 2-year killing spree. but soldiers had short memory and long suspicions. In a world built on rumor, her quietness was both armor and target. Colonel Danner looked up from his laptop when she entered. "Madsen, sit down." She did. He turned the screen toward her. Satellite imagery, different terrain. Not mountains this time, desert plateau, broken by jagged canyons and dead villages. "Western Kandahar province," he said. "Insurgent groups have been using it as a corridor to move weapons. We've lost 2 recon teams in the last month." Ellery studied the map. "You're sending me to find them." Danner shook his head. "No, we're sending you to lead a new sniper element. You'll train a small group of candidates rotating in from different battalions, field mentorship, live fire exercises. You'll teach them what you know." She looked at him, calm, measured. "Why me?" He smirked. "Because apparently you see patterns no one else does." Music rises slightly, low percussion, steady heartbeat tempo. Camp Orion was smaller, rougher, and far from the structured world she was used to. A cluster of tents surrounded by clay walls, sunburned vehicles, and tired men. No one saluted here unless they had to. You could tell who had been there too long by how quiet they were. Her trainees came in on a convoy the second day. 4 soldiers, 3 men, 1 woman. Corporal Vega, tall and stubborn. Private Lang, eager but reckless. Staff Sergeant Cole, older, skeptical, scarred from a roadside blast years ago. And then there was the youngest specialist, Amira Stone, barely 21. Eyes sharp, questions sharper. Ellery introduced herself without ceremony. "Call me Ellery, or Sergeant, doesn't matter. Out here you'll learn one thing: patience kills more enemies than bullets." Lang chuckled under his breath. "Heard that one before." She looked at him, steady. "Then you've never really waited." No one laughed after that. The first few days were dry drills, movement, range estimation, spotting corrections. Ellery's instruction was precise, minimal, never loud. She had Colin's teaching voice now, calm even when frustrated, detached even when disappointed. But where Colin's tone had been cold, hers carried something else: quiet empathy. At night she stayed by the fire with a notebook on her knee, mapping terrain, marking possible ambush routes. Amira often sat nearby, cleaning her rifle. One night she finally spoke. "Is it true, what they say about you?" Ellery didn't look up. "Depends what they say." "That you took out a Russian sniper from nearly 900 meters, and he said something before he died." Ellery's hands paused for a moment. She didn't look at the girl. "What he said doesn't matter," she replied. "What matters is why he said it." "And why did he?" Ellery met her gaze then. Her voice dropped lower. "Because sometimes death recognizes its reflection." Amira didn't ask again. Weeks passed. The training intensified. Under Ellery's command, the unit began to move like one mind. She took them on live overwatches, real patrol coverage, real risks. In those endless stretches of sun and dust, she saw pieces of herself in each of them. Lang's overconfidence, Vega's need for approval, Cole's silence after too many deployments. And Amira, the young one, had the same hunger Ellery once did. That quiet fire that could burn a person alive from the inside if they didn't learn when to let go. One afternoon, during wind drills, Amira missed a target by inches and cursed under her breath. Ellery crouched beside her. "Stop fighting it. I had the dope perfect. You had the math perfect. But the wind isn't math, it's a conversation." Amira frowned. "A conversation." Ellery pointed at the horizon. "Look, the dust shifts before the wind hits. It tells you what's coming. Don't react to the shot. Anticipate the change." Amira followed her line of sight, watching the shimmer move across the valley. Then she adjusted, exhaled, fired. The steel target pinged faintly in the distance. Ellery smiled. almost invisible. Good, now do it 100 more times. Soft transition, nightfall, wind over sand, a low hum of memory. That night, Ellery dreamed again. She was back in Oregon. The forest, the stillness, Colin's voice behind her. Your enemy's fear is your mirror, Elle. When you can see what scares them, you already control the fight. She turned, but in the dream, his face wasn't his anymore. It shifted, half shadow, half her own reflection. She woke up gasping, heart racing. For the first time in years, her hands trembled. She sat up, breathing through it, trying to quiet the storm in her chest. And for the first time since she'd killed Anton Baranov, she wondered if the war she'd inherited from Colin wasn't over at all. The next morning, a radio call came from command. Intercepted chatter, unknown sniper activity in their sector. Reports of a precision kill on a local patrol, one shot, perfect through the plate carrier. Ellery froze when she heard the details. The shot angle, the distance. 870 meters. Same range she'd used in SH Joy Valley. She ordered the team to gear up. No hesitation, no delay. Within an hour, they were on the ridge above the kill site. Wind howled through the stones. Below, a small crater marked where the patrol's Humvee had stopped. One man dead, 2 wounded. Ellery scanned the ridges through her scope, slow, methodical. Nothing, Vega muttered, could have been random, lucky hit. No, Ellery said quietly, luck doesn't group shots like that. She pulled out her rangefinder, tracing the arc of the canyon. Their far side, faint disturbance on a rock ledge, a casing glinting in sunlight. She felt her stomach knot. Pack up, she said, we're moving. They reached the opposite ridge before sunset. The air was thin, the world silent except for the rasp of their breathing. Ellery found the position quickly, a perfect hide. Good cover, escape routes, natural line of sight. It was like someone had read her mind. Lang knelt beside her. How the hell did he? Not he, Ellery interrupted. They. She pointed at the footprints, 2 sets, one lighter, smaller. Her pulse quickened. Spotter and shooter, but they're not local, look at this. The boot treads were military issue, Western. She crouched lower, scanning the dust. There a cigarette butt, American brand. And beside it, etched faintly in the rock with a knife tip, a single word. Ghost. Her throat tightened. Amira's voice broke the silence. Ma'am, what does that mean? Ellery stood slowly, looking toward the horizon. It means someone out here knows who trained me. Tense music rises, heartbeat tempo. They return to base under a blood-orange sky, the weight of the find heavy in every step. That night she sat alone again with Colin's old journal. Flipping through pages she'd memorized, wind tables, positions, sketches, until she reached the back. There, under layers of faded ink, was a phrase she'd never noticed before. Written sideways, almost hidden in the spine crease. If the system repeats, it's not coincidence, it's inheritance. She whispered the words out loud, then closed the book. She knew what it meant now. Someone wasn't copying her stepfather's tactics. Someone was continuing them. But who? The next day, command sent a message. Unverified sniper team operating near the border. U.S. gear, no identification. Intelligence called them a rogue element. Ellery didn't believe in coincidence anymore. She stared at the report for a long time, then whispered to herself. They're not rogue, they're trained. Her hand brushed the old rifle leaning against the wall, Colin's M24. The weapon that should have ended its story years ago. She exhaled. The decision settled in her bones before she even realized she'd made it. She would find them. Not as a mission. Not as revenge. But as a question she'd carried since childhood. How far did Colin's shadow reach? And what did it mean that someone else was walking inside it now? That night, she sat outside the tent under the open desert sky. Amira joined her quietly, 2 mugs of instant coffee in hand. They drank in silence for a while before the younger woman finally asked, "Why do you keep going back out there, after everything you've seen?" Ellery looked up at the stars, then down at the sand. "Because the things we don't face, they find new ways to come back." Amira frowned. "You mean ghosts?" Ellery smiled faintly. "I mean history." The desert wind carried her words away, swallowed by the night. And somewhere beyond the horizon, under another patch of sky, another rifle was being cleaned by hands that moved just like hers once did. A mirror waiting to be found. How do you hunt a ghost when the ghost moves like you? Ellery hadn't slept. Not really. Her body rested, but her mind kept replaying that one word carved into the rock: ghost. It wasn't just a name, it was a signature. Colin's signature. Now it had reappeared, 20 years later, carved by hands that understood what it meant. By morning, she'd already made up her mind. She walked into the command tent, dusty, eyes hollow but sharp. Colonel Danner looked up from his tablet. "You're supposed to be training Madsen." "I am," she said, "but someone out there's using our doctrine, my stepfathers. If we don't find them first, they'll start killing Americans again." Danner sighed. "You're chasing ghosts." She didn't blink. "Maybe, but I know which direction they're moving." Music shift, steady percussion, desert tone. Ellery took only one spotter, Amira. The others she left at base. This wasn't a teaching run anymore. It was something quieter, something personal. They left before dawn, 2 figures moving through the sand like shadows. The plan was simple: follow the pattern of recent engagements and predict where the next sniper hide would appear. Ellery's gut told her whoever this was, they weren't acting alone. Every kill, every position precise, surgical, clean. Someone was training them the way Colin had trained her. Halfway through the march, Amira finally broke the silence. "You really think this person knew him?" Ellery nodded slowly. "Not just knew him, learned from him." Amira frowned. "But how? He's been dead for years." Ellery looked out at the horizon, where heat shimmered like smoke. Ghosts teach in more ways than one. They reached an abandoned village by sunset. The air smelled like old dust and burned diesel. Broken walls, rusted oil drums, and the faint echo of life that had left long ago. Ellery motioned for Amira to hold. She scanned the rooftops through her scope. No movement. Then a reflection, just for a second. A glint, high on a roof 200 meters out. She froze. "Glass," she whispered. Amira ducked. "You think?" "Not think, no." Ellery sighted in, searching for a target. Nothing. Whoever was there was already gone. She climbed to the roof anyway, boots silent against the crumbling stone. There, near the parapet, she found another mark scratched into the concrete. Not words this time, coordinates. Half erased, half daunting. Amira read them aloud. "That's 30 clicks east, open desert." Ellery's stomach turned. That was where Colin's last operation had taken place, the one the army had called unconfirmed activity. She whispered, "They're leading us." Amira looked at her. "Then why follow?" Ellery's eyes narrowed. "Because they want me to, and I want to know why." Music fades to low piano, tension breathing. That night they camped in the open, just beyond the dunes. The stars burned sharp against the black sky. The desert was so silent it felt alive. Amira lay awake beside her rifle, pretending to rest. "You ever think about leaving?" "Leaving what?" "The army, the noise, the ghosts." Ellery smiled faintly. "Every day." "So why don't you?" She thought about it, about Colin, about Baranov, about every target whose name she never knew. Then she said, because leaving doesn't erase what's inside you. It just takes away your reason for carrying it. Amira nodded quietly. He must have meant a lot to you. Ellery didn't answer. She didn't need to. At dawn, they moved toward the coordinates. The sand flattened into open plain, littered with old Soviet wrecks and forgotten bones of machines. It took them 6 hours to find the spot, a rise of rock overlooking a dried riverbed. Ellery studied it through her scope, scanning for human traces. Then she saw it, faint but deliberate, a small flag marker stuck in the sand like a signal. Beside it, a spent casing, .300 Winchester Magnum. American make. Her pulse quickened. She picked it up, turned it in her hand. Scratched along its side were 2 letters, carved deep into the brass. E.M. Her initials. Amira saw her expression and stepped closer. What the hell? Ellery's voice went flat. They're not just using my training, they're watching me. Back at Camp Orion, Colonel Danner wasn't pleased. Madsen, this isn't your personal investigation. It stopped being personal when someone started killing with my name. He exhaled hard, rubbing his temples. Intel thinks it's a black market group, ex-contractors, maybe someone from your sniper school passing old tactics around. Don't make this about your stepfather. But Ellery just said quietly, it was always about him. Cut to quiet scene, Ellery alone in tent, soft rain outside. That night she finally opened Colin's journal again, the last few pages brittle with time. One entry near the end caught her eye. If this ends wrong, they'll bury my name before they bury me. But someone has to keep watching. Someone has to keep the edge sharp. Below it, a set of coordinates, the same one she just visited. She closed the notebook slowly. For the first time, she wondered if Colin had planned all of this, left a trail, not to protect her, but to test whoever followed. She whispered to the empty room, "What were you doing out here, Colin?" Tension builds, faint low drones, rhythmic footsteps. 2 days later, a drone feed came in, grainy footage from a recon patrol 20 miles north. A lone shooter spotted moving between ridges, precision movement. No local fighter moved like that. Command couldn't get a positive ID before the feed cut out. But Ellery saw something the others didn't. The way the shooter carried the rifle, high, balanced, left hand braced under the stock, fingers curled just so. That was her stance. Her father's stance. She said nothing, but something cold settled behind her ribs. At night she took Amira aside. "I'm going to find them." Amira frowned. "Command won't approve." "I'm not asking them to." The younger woman hesitated, then said quietly, "Then you're not going alone." Ellery almost smiled. "You're stubborn. Learn from the best." Scene change, night infiltration. Soft music builds like pulse. They moved under moonlight, crossing the canyon system by dead reckoning. Ellery led, scanning the horizon through her thermal scope. Every sound felt amplified, every rockslide, every heartbeat. By 300, they reached an overlook above a narrow valley. She stopped. Something in the air felt wrong, heavy, charged, like a storm before thunder. Through her scope, she saw it, faint heat signatures, 2 figures kneeling near a small fire. Rifles beside them. She adjusted focus, trying to see faces. But before she could, one of the figures looked up directly at her. Like they knew exactly where she was. Her breath caught. Then a faint light blinked near the fire, a reflection. A signal mirror. 3 flashes, paused, 2 flashes. Her pulse spiked. She recognized the code. Friend approach. The same code Colin had used with her during childhood training drills. Amira whispered, "What do we do?" Ellery's voice was almost a whisper, "We go." They descended the ridge slow, careful. The figures stayed still, waiting. When they reached the fire, the taller one stood, male, bearded, maybe late 30s. Contractor gear but no insignia. The second figure stepped forward, female, compact frame, rifle slung low. "Sergeant Ellery Madsen," the man said, his voice calm, rehearsed. "We've been expecting you." Ellery's hand tightened on her rifle. "Who are you?" He smiled faintly. "People who still believe in the ghost's work." She froze. The woman spoke next, soft voice, American accent. "Colin Hale trained more than one." Ellery's breath caught. "That's impossible." "Is it?" the woman asked. "Your proof it is." Ellery stared at her, the stance, the eyes, the steady calm. It was like watching a reflection in a cracked mirror. "What do you want?" The woman smiled faintly. "To finish what he started." Music fades to hollow echo, low wind through stone. When Ellery and Amira returned to base hours later, dawn was breaking. They hadn't fired a shot. Hadn't said much after leaving the ridge. The world looked the same, but Ellery felt something shift inside her. Colin's shadow had grown longer. And now she wasn't sure if she was chasing it or becoming it. That night she wrote in her notebook again. There are people still moving under his rules. Maybe that's what immortality looks like, not glory, not name, just the echo that keeps walking when you stop. She closed the book, her reflection flickering in the metal lid of her canteen. And for the first time, she wondered if ghosts weren't real because of the dead, but because of the living who refused to let them fade. Why hadn't she turned them in? By protocol, she should have called command the second she made contact. 2 unidentified operators, unauthorized activity. Textbook procedure. But instead she'd walked away. No shots, no names. Just questions she couldn't stop hearing in her own head. Now back at Camp Orion, she sat in the armory alone. Her rifle lay disassembled on the table, parts lined up with surgical precision. She wasn't cleaning it anymore. She was thinking with it. Every time she touched the cold steel, Colin's voice came back. "A rifle is truth, the rest is politics." She didn't know if she believed that anymore. Cut to early morning scene, command tent, radio chatter fatting in. Colonel Danner was already waiting when she entered. He didn't look up. "I've been reviewing your field report, Madsen. You left out a few details." "I gave you what mattered. 2 unmarked operators on our soil doesn't matter." She didn't answer. Danner slammed a folder onto the table. "You're walking a thin line, Sergeant. Command thinks you're chasing ghosts again. I need to know if you're still mission-focused or if this thing with your stepfather has you off balance." Ellery met his gaze. "You think I'm emotional." "I think you're haunted," he said, "and haunted soldiers make dangerous decisions." Her voice didn't rise. Maybe haunted soldiers are the only ones who still see clearly. He stared at her, jaw tight, then pushed the folder closer. "You've been ordered to stand down. No more solo operations. No personal missions, understood?" She nodded once, but her eyes didn't agree. Soft piano enters, reflective tone. That night she couldn't sleep. The camp was quiet, just wind through canvas, boots against gravel, the low hum of generators. She sat outside her tent, moonlight cutting across her face. The desert looked endless, like a sea that had forgotten water. Amira approached, carrying 2 cups of instant coffee. "They're talking about grounding you," she said softly. Ellery took the cup but didn't drink. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried to erase what they don't understand. Amira hesitated. "Those people we met, what did they mean? The ghost's work?" Ellery looked at her, the firelight catching the silver in her eyes. Colin believed war was changing, that the army was too slow, too bound by politics. He started training people to think independently, to act without waiting for permission. He thought he was creating protectors. And he didn't tell anyone. "He told the wrong people," Ellery said quietly. People who saw control, not conscience. Amira frowned. You think they're still following his system? Ellery nodded. I think they turned it into something else. Scene transition, early dawn. Helicopter rotors fade into the distance. By sunrise, Ellery had made her decision. She stopped believing the truth would find her. She'd go find it herself. She packed light rifle, map, notebook, canteen. Amira followed without question. Where are we going? Back where it started, Ellery said, to Colin's last coordinates. They rode out in a dusty convoy until the road turned to sand. Then they went on foot, following the ghost of a trail that had been forgotten since before either of them had enlisted. Every step felt heavier, every mile quieter. After 6 hours they reached it, a dry basin surrounded by cliffs. An old operations bunker half buried in sand. She knew the shape instantly. She'd seen it once before, in Colin's journal sketches. Home, she whispered. Sound echoing footsteps, door hinges groaning open. Inside, the air was stale and cold. Walls lined with empty crates. A single rusted cot. And on the far table, half buried under sand, a sealed case. She brushed the dust away, opened it. Inside were documents wrapped in oilskin, a flash drive, and a faded patch that read Ghost Unit. Amira leaned over her shoulder. What is this? Ellery's voice came out tight. Proof. The documents were after-action reports, dates from 20 years ago, stamped unauthorized in red ink. Colin's name appeared again and again, alongside others. Same code names as the ones from the 2 operators in the desert. She scrolled through the flash drive on her field tablet. Encrypted files, coordinates. Dozens of them, everyone tied to sniper incidents around the world that had never been claimed. Amira whispered, he was running an entire network. Ellery shook her head. Not was, is, someone kept it alive. Music builds, low drums, then silence. Before they could say another word, a sound cracked through the still air, a single suppressed shot. The wall beside Ellery's head exploded in dust. Down, she yelled, shoving Amira behind a crate. She peeked through the gap, a flicker of movement near the canyon rim. 2 shooters, maybe more. Amira's breathing quickened. We're boxed in. Ellery's mind went still. She remembered Colin's drills, find the rhythm, break it. She grabbed her rifle, sighted in through the opening. Wind 9 mph, quartering left, range 620. She fired once. Silence. Then another shot from a second ridge higher angle. This wasn't random. They were testing her. She realized it when the second round hit exactly where her shot had originated, like they'd known her firing pattern before she even pulled the trigger. Someone out there understood her better than she did. Move, she ordered. They crawled through a side tunnel that opened toward the east. Bullets tore the sand around them, ricocheting like hornets. When they finally cleared the basin, Amira stumbled, panting. Who the hell are they? Ellery didn't answer. She just stared back at the canyon, where the morning light caught a reflection on one of the rifles, her rifle's twin. Then faintly, through the calm static in her headset, a voice came. Distorted, calm, familiar. You're close, Ellery, he'd be proud. She froze. Amira's eyes widened. Was that? Ellery whispered, no one should have that frequency. Then the line went dead. Silence, then soft piano returns, reflective tone. They made it back to base by nightfall, silent, bruised, dusty. No one asked questions. Danner was waiting again. He looked at their condition and knew, you disobeyed a direct order. Ellery stared back, you knew about them. What? The Ghost Unit, Colin's off-books program, you buried it. Danner's face tightened. That program was shut down 15 years ago, classified, contained. Then why are they shooting at me? He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, because you weren't supposed to find them. Her voice went cold. They're killing our people. And if you keep digging, they'll start killing more. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Ellery, listen to me. You don't understand how deep this goes. There are files above my clearance, operations that never made it into the record. Walk away before this eats you alive. She looked at him, calm but steady. I can't walk away from what already owns me. Danner sighed. Then I can't protect you. Then don't, she said. And she walked out. Fade to night scene, Ellery alone, writing in her notebook. I used to think ghosts were about memory. Now I think they're about accountability. The things no one wants to admit are still alive. She paused, then wrote a second line. If they made monsters to protect the innocent, what does that make me? She closed the notebook and stared into the dark. Somewhere beyond the wire, unseen eyes were watching her. And for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt recognized. Voice lowers, somber reflection. The next day, she gathered her team. Vega, Lang Cole, and Mira. She told them the truth, at least part of it. There's a group operating off-record, using our tactics, using our names. They've already made contact. Command won't move on it, so we will. Cole frowned. What's our objective? Find them, find whoever's leading them, and stop them before they rewrite what it means to be a soldier. Lang exhaled. You realize that sounds suicidal. Ellery nodded. So did every mission that mattered. Amira met her eyes steady. When do we leave? Ellery looked at the horizon, the endless stretch of tan and shadow. Tomorrow, she said, before they decide we're already ghosts too. Music swells, quiet crescendo, hopeful and tragic. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, the camp lights flickered one by one. Ellery stood at the edge of the wire, wind cutting through her hair, watching the desert bleed into darkness. She thought of Colin, of his quiet eyes, his steady hand guiding hers on the rifle. He wanted to create something that could protect the helpless. Instead, he'd created something that couldn't die. She whispered to the empty wind, I'll finish it, Colin, one way or another. The desert didn't answer. But somewhere far off, a single shot echoed, distant, precise, and deliberate. A message only she could understand. How far do you go before you stop being the hero of your own story? The convoy moved under moonlight, engines barely above a whisper. Ellery rode in the lead vehicle, window down, eyes locked on the horizon, that infinite line where desert and sky blurred into the same colorless void. Behind her, the rest of the team followed. Vega driving, Lang checking comms, Cole staring out the window like he was seeing ghosts already. And Amira, quiet, focused, her rifle across her knees like an extension of her heartbeat. They were moving off-grid now. No satellite tracking, no command oversight. Just coordinates taken from Colin's old flash drive. The final file marked Phoenix site. Amira leaned forward. You think they'll be there? Ellery didn't look back. If they wanted me to find them, they'll be waiting. Lang gave a nervous laugh. And if they do? Ellery's voice was calm. Then we wait. Scene cut dawn. A ridge overlooking the ruins of an old outpost. The base lay half buried in the sand, camel netting shredded by wind. From above it looked dead. But Ellery had learned that death often looked quiet before it spoke. They set up overwatch positions before entering. Through her scope, she spotted the details command would have missed: faint footprints near the south perimeter, recently disturbed sand, a half-buried antenna still transmitting a weak signal. Someone been here, she whispered. Cole frowned. Looks abandoned to me. Ellery shook her head. That's what they want you to think. Sound, boots crunching gravel, interior echo as they move through the outpost. The inside smelled like rust and dust, but the layout was familiar. Training lanes, weapon benches, range maps pinned to the walls. It was the same setup Colin used back in Oregon. Exact same structure. Amira ran her hand along the walls. This place, it's built for snipers. Ellery nodded, not built, copied. They found the operations room at the center. On the wall, dozens of photos and hand-drawn maps. Sniper nests, confirmed kills, faces of soldiers, some marked neutralized, others observed. And pinned at the center, a photo of Ellery. Taken from distance. She stared at it silent. Lang muttered, "They've been tracking you for months." Ellery exhaled slowly, "No, for years." Voice lowers, soft piano under slow narration. They found a terminal still running on battery. Vega booted it up, working through the old encryption protocols. Lines of data filled the screen, mission logs, kill reports, encrypted transmissions. Then one file appeared, Doctrine Continuation. Ellery opened it. Inside were Colin's training manuals, updated, edited, and reissued under a new author. Every principle he'd taught, repurposed into something colder. She read aloud. Patience is control, fear is leverage, conscience is inefficiency. Her throat tightened. That's not his writing. Amira looked at her, then whose is it? Before Ellery could answer, a voice came from behind. Mine. Sound, boots scraping concrete, rifles raised. They turned. A man stood in the doorway, mid-40s, combat gear faded from years of sun, rifle slung low. Behind him, two armed figures, disciplined, silent. He stepped into the light. "Put the weapons down," he said calmly. "If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have made it this far." Ellery's finger hovered over the trigger. "Who are you?" He smiled faintly. "Name's Mason Red. You might not remember me, but I remember you, Colin's girl." Ellery froze. Mason nodded. "Yeah, he trained me before you. Back when the Ghost unit still believed in protecting people, before Command decided conscience was a liability." Vega muttered, "So this is what's left of them." Red ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on Ellery. "You've been busy, killing one of ours in the valley, digging through graves. You really think we didn't see you coming?" Ellery's jaw tightened. "You've been targeting Americans." "Collateral," he said simply. "Command abandoned the unit, pretended we never existed. We had to adapt. You know what happens when good soldiers get erased. They become the very thing they were trained to fight." Amira stepped forward, anger flashing. "That's not adaptation, that's betrayal." Red smiled faintly, spoken like someone who still believes the uniform means something. Then softer to Ellery. "He'd be proud, you know, the way you move, the way you shoot. You kept the Ghost alive." Ellery's voice broke slightly. "You twisted what he taught." Red shook his head. "We perfected it." Sound, distant wind, tension, hum. He gestured toward the maps on the wall. "These are the new doctrines. The system works because we took people like you, true believers, and freed them from bureaucracy. You of all people should understand." Ellery lowered her rifle slightly. "You think freedom comes from killing without reason." He studied her for a long moment. "I think reason died with your stepfather." The words hit like a shot. Ellery's breath caught. "He didn't die of a heart attack, did he?" Red's silence was answer enough. She stepped closer. "Tell me what happened." Red exhaled. "He found out Command was using the Ghost unit for black contracts, assassinations they couldn't sign their name to. He tried to expose it. They silenced him before he could. Officially, heart attack, real story, double-tapped by his own." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Ellery's hands trembled, not from fear but from the cold clarity that came with truth. "He trusted you," she said quietly. Red's eyes softened. "He trusted all of us. That was his mistake." Music softens, piano, minor key. Outside, the wind howled like the desert was listening. Ellery took a slow step forward. You want revenge, I get it. But what you're doing now, it's not justice. It's infection. You're spreading what killed him. Red's jaw tightened. Justice is a luxury for the living. She shook her head. No, it's the one thing that keeps us human. A silence fell. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then Red said softly, "You sound just like him." He reached into his vest and pulled out a data drive. Took me years to collect this. Names, operations, contracts, proof of what command buried. You want the truth here. He tossed it to her. It clattered at her feet. But understand this, he said, voice low. Once you open that file, you're one of us. Because the moment you know the truth, they'll start hunting you too. Ellery didn't move. And what about you? He smiled faintly. They stopped hunting me a long time ago. Then, without another word, he turned and disappeared into the dunes, his two shadows following. Sound, silence, faint heartbeat. Back at the outpost, Ellery stared at the drive in her hand. It felt heavier than any rifle she'd ever carried. Amira broke the silence. We should destroy it. Vega shook his head. We could expose everything, end this. Lang frowned. Or start a war we can't control. Ellery looked at them, her voice quiet but unyielding. We find out what's inside first. Cut to campfire outside, low flicker, wind carrying sand. They sat around the small flame, the drive plugged into Ellery's tablet. Lines of encrypted data filled the screen. Collins' missions, ghost unit movements, names American and foreign. And then a final entry, dated 3 months before Collins' death. If she ever finds this, tell her the truth. Ghosts aren't born, they're chosen. Not by fate, by conscience. Ellery's hands clenched around the device. She could feel Amira watching her. What does it mean? Ellery whispered. It means he knew I'd come. Voice lowers to near whisper. Music fades to reflective piano. Later that night, when everyone else had fallen asleep, she walked out alone. The stars were sharp, the air thin. She looked east, toward the mountains where she'd fired her first shot as a soldier, and where her father's story had ended. She raised her hand, fingers brushing the old scar near her wrist, the one Colin used to call her reminder mark. She whispered, "You tried to build something that would outlive you. Maybe you did, but now I have to decide what kind of ghost I want to be." Soft moral reflection, quiet tone, faint cello beneath. In the end, truth didn't come with applause or headlines. It came in the shape of a small flash drive, warm from her hand, heavy with history. Ellery knew opening it would change everything. But not opening it would mean living the same lie that killed Colin. As the wind rose again, lifting sand across the camp, she made her choice. She slid the drive into her vest, turned toward the sleeping camp, and whispered to the desert. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it just acts. And somewhere in the distance, so faint it could have been memory, a voice answered back. You're her. What if the truth you're looking for destroys everything it was meant to save? The desert was still when Ellery woke. No gunfire, no radio chatter, only the heavy silence that comes when everyone's afraid to breathe first. She sat by the dying embers of the fire, the flash drive resting in her palm. It didn't look like much, brushed metal, chipped edges, but it carried the weight of 20 years of buried sins. Amira stirred beside her. You didn't sleep. I wasn't planning to. You're really going to open it, aren't you? Ellery turned the drive in her fingers, watching the light catch its edges. If I don't, I'll never know why he died. Amira's voice softened. And if it's worse than you think. Ellery looked at her, gray eyes steady. Then at least it'll finally be honest. Soft piano enters, low, steady heartbeat tempo. Inside the operations tent, the others gathered. Vega, arms crossed, cautious. Lang packing, restless energy barely held in check. Cole silent, expression unreadable. Amira by Ellery's side. Ellery slid the flash drive into the terminal. The screen flickered. Lines of encrypted code scrolled upward. Then a single directory appeared. Ghost Program, Continuation Protocol. Lang muttered, "That's the same title as the last file." Ellery clicked. Dozens of video logs opened, some dated back 20 years, others recent. She clicked the most recent first. The screen filled with static, then resolved into an image. A man in uniform, older, tired, his voice rough but calm. Colin Hale. Everyone froze. He looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this, you found what they buried. That means they'll come for you next." Ellery's breath caught, her throat tightened. Colin continued. "They called it the Ghost Program because we worked in shadows. But somewhere along the way, the shadows started working in us. We became tools, not soldiers. And when I tried to stop it, they erased the name, not the system." He leaned closer. "If they're still using my doctrine, it means someone kept the machine running. You'll recognize it because it looks like you. People who can't stop doing the right thing even when it costs them everything." His voice cracked slightly. "If it's you watching this, Ellery, don't follow me down, expose it, burn it, end it. Don't become the silence that killed me." The video ended. The tent stayed quiet long after the screen went black. Vega was the first to speak. "That settles it. We take this to command. Let the world see what they've done." Cole shook his head. "You think they'll let this go public? You'll disappear before you get 2 miles out of base." Lang snapped, "So what, we just sit on it?" Ellery stared at the blank screen. Her reflection looked older than it had that morning. "This isn't about exposure," she said quietly. "It's about accountability." Amira frowned. "What's the difference?" Ellery's voice went soft, almost distant. "Exposure punishes, accountability heals." Music lowers to a subtle hum, 10 strings. Later, Ellery sat outside, tablet balanced on her knees. She scrolled through the rest of the files, mission logs, payment trails, black contracts routed through shell companies. She saw Colin's name appear again and again, then crossed out, replaced by coded initials. E. Sorry. The last few entries were recent. Operations tagged current. Under one, target elimination, operatives MRED A. Sloan. Oversight, HQ authorization, EM. Her breath stopped. They were forging her identity, using her name to authorize hits. She whispered to herself, "They're not just rewriting history, they're rewriting me." Scene cut inside comms tent, radio static faint. She called the only number she still trusted, Colonel Danner's secure line. The connection cracked in and out. "Madsen, where the hell are you?" "I have proof, files from the Ghost Unit. Colin's logs, internal contracts, you need to see this." He hesitated. "Ellery, you need to stop talking right now. There are ears on this line." "They're using my name, Colonel. They're executing operations under my authorization. If I disappear." Static cut her off. Then Danner's voice, low and urgent. "Listen to me, you're not safe at Orion. Evac is compromised. Get to the old airfield south of the valley. I'll send a clean bird." Then silence. Amira watched her from the tent doorway. "What did he say?" Ellery pocketed the drive. "We move in 10. Transition night march, wind whipping." They moved through the desert like ghosts. Every sound felt louder, every breath a confession. Halfway to the airfield, Lang froze. Movement, 9 o'clock. Through the NVG scope, Ellery saw it, heat signatures on the ridge. 304. Then the first shot came. Sand exploded beside them. Cole shouted, "Contact front." They scattered, diving for cover. Ellery scanned through her scope. A silhouette moved between rocks, the same posture, the same fluidity. Her stomach dropped. Amira yelled, "It's them." Ellery fired once, the muzzle flash lighting her face. Another shot answered from the ridge, close, precise, almost synchronized with hers. It felt like dueling with a mirror. When the gunfire stopped, only silence answered. They held position until dawn. At sunrise, they advanced on the ridge. No bodies, no blood. Just a single bullet casing left neatly on a rock. Carved into the brass, Ghost KEPS Watch. Lang whispered, "What the hell does that mean?" Ellery's voice was steady. "It means they're not done with us." Voice softens, reflective tone returns. By midday, they reached the old airfield. The place was empty, a cracked runway, skeletal hangars, sand drifting through broken glass. A helicopter waited at the far end, engine running, rotors kicking up dust. Danner stood beside it, sunglasses on, wind pulling at his uniform. "You made it," he said. "Hand it over." Ellery hesitated. "You said this bird was clean." "It is." She glanced at Amira, then back at Danner. "Then why are there no insignias on it?" He exhaled, lowering his voice. "Ellery, I didn't call that bird, they did." Sound, rotors intensify, distant shout. The side door slid open, and Mason Red stepped out. Unarmed, calm. Amira raised her rifle instantly. Ellery held up a hand. "Wait." Red smiled faintly. "I told you they'd come for you. Looks like they prefer helicopters to honesty." Danner looked between them, confusion and dread mixing on his face. "What's going on here?" Red tossed something at Ellery's feet, a radio earpiece. "Listen." She put it in. A voice came through, cold, official, American. "Staff Sergeant Ellery Madsen, you are ordered to surrender the recovered data immediately. Non-compliance will be treated as treason." Amira's face went pale. "They're serious." Ellery stared at the helicopter, the insignia-less machine humming like a mechanical heart. She took a slow breath. "If I hand it over, it disappears, and so do we." Red nodded. "Then don't hand it over." Tension builds, low drums. The soldiers on the helicopter leveled their rifles. Danner stepped in front of her, raising his hands. "Don't do this. She's not your enemy." But they didn't lower their weapons. Ellery reached into her vest, pulled the flash drive, and held it up. "Hear your truth," she said, "all of it." Then she tossed it, not to them, but into the sand behind her. The rotor wash scattered dust across the air. In that split second of confusion, Ellery fired. Her shot hit the engine intake. The helicopter lurched sideways, smoke spilling from the rotor. "Move," she yelled. They dove for cover as rounds ripped across the runway. Red dragged Danner behind a concrete barrier. When the shooting finally stopped, the helicopter was burning. No movement inside. Ellery's heart hammered against her ribs. Amira shouted over the wind, "What now?" Ellery looked at the rising smoke, the flash drive buried somewhere beneath the sand. "Now," she said, voice steady, "we decide what kind of ghosts we want to be." Soft moral reflection, music eases into slow piano. That night they camped miles away, the fire small and trembling in the wind. The data was gone, the proof burned. But the truth lived on in her memory, in their silence, in the echoes of every secret she'd uncovered. Amira broke the quiet. "You could have kept it, you could have used it." Ellery shook her head. "No, that's how it spreads. Once you start believing truth only matters when it serves you, you become them." Red stared into the fire. "So what now?" She looked at him. "You tell the others to stop, to disappear, to let the dead finally rest." He nodded slowly. "And you?" Ellery's gaze drifted toward the horizon, endless, dark, unbroken. "I'm going home," she said. where it started. Maybe it's time to stop living like a weapon. Red studied her for a moment, then said quietly, he'd be proud. She smiled faintly. Tell me to aim steadier. The wind picked up, carrying the fire's embers into the night sky. They looked like stars, or maybe ghosts finding their way home. How do you go home when the home you left never really existed? Ellery hadn't seen Oregon in 6 years. Not since her mother's funeral. The forest road felt smaller now, the trees taller, the air sharper. She drove slow, windows down, letting the smell of pine and rain fill the spaces war had hollowed out inside her. The rifle was gone, the medals too. She left them all behind, traded in for a quiet she wasn't sure she deserved. But some things refused to stay buried. Her stepfather's cabin stood exactly where memory said it would, a lean figure of wood and shadow against the slope. Half rotted, half sacred. She stopped the truck and just stared. Amira stepped out beside her, eyes wide. So this is where it all started. Ellery nodded, where it all ended too. Soft ambient sound, crunch of gravel, distant crow call. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and oil and time. Everything was where Colin had left it, the worn books, the old scope lenses lined neatly on the shelf, the firewood stacked with military precision. On the workbench, under a thin layer of dust, lay a wooden box. She opened it slowly. Inside, her stepfather's journal, the first one, leather cracked, pages yellow. And beneath it, a note she'd never seen before. Her breath caught as she unfolded it. The handwriting was his. If you find this, it means you survived long enough to learn what survival costs. Remember this, you don't honor ghosts by becoming one. You honor them by living better than they did. She folded it carefully and set it back. For a long time she just stood there, head bowed, as if the air itself demanded silence. Amira spoke softly from behind her. You think he knew it would all come to this? Ellery shook her head. He knew it had to. Scene fade, dusk light filtering through trees, fire crackling in the cabin stove. That night they lit the old stove and sat in front of it. No uniforms, no rifles, just two soldiers trying to remember what peace was supposed to sound like. Amira broke the quiet first. What will you do now? Ellery thought about it. The question felt heavier than any mission she'd ever taken. I don't know, she said. Maybe teach, maybe just stop. Amira smiled faintly. You make a good teacher, scary but good. Ellery chuckled softly, a rare sound, brittle and human. I used to think teaching was what you did when you couldn't fight anymore. Now, I think it's what you do when you finally understand why you fought. They sat in silence, firelight moving across their faces. Outside, rain began to fall, steady, cleansing, the kind that makes the earth breathe again. Cut to morning, soft gray light, quiet forest ambience. When dawn came, Ellery walked down to the clearing where Colin had once built his shooting range. The targets were long gone, swallowed by moss and wildflowers. She stood at the edge, hands in her pockets, watching the mist curl around the tree line. For the first time in years, she didn't see distances or angles or wind drift. She just saw a horizon, unmeasured, undefined. Amira joined her, holding 2 mugs of steaming coffee. Doesn't feel real, she said quietly, after everything. Ellery nodded. That's the thing about war. It ends everywhere except inside you. Do you regret it? Ellery took a slow sip, thinking. I used to, but regret's just memory with guilt attached. What I feel now, it's different. It's gratitude, I think, for the people who stayed, for the ones who didn't. She looked at Amira, for the ones who made it mean something. Amira smiled softly. You sound like him. Ellery's eyes lingered on the horizon. He wasn't wrong about everything, just about what it would cost. Voice lowers, soft reflective piano returns. Later, while Amira packed the truck, Ellery went back inside the cabin one last time. She looked around slowly, the books, the tools, the quiet ghosts of every lesson she'd ever learned. Then she reached under the floorboard, where Colin had once hidden his ammunition case. Inside she found something new, wrapped in oilcloth, marked with his old unit's crest. She unwrapped it carefully. A letter sealed, addressed in neat handwriting, to whoever carries the ghost's burden next. She hesitated, then unfolded it. There will always be someone who believes they can fix the world with a rifle. Maybe they can for a while, but every shot carves a story, and stories don't end when the trigger resets. They echo. Choose what you want yours to say. At the bottom, one final line. You are not the ghost, Elle. You are the proof he was real. Tears came quietly, like confession. She folded the letter, placed it back in the box, and whispered, "Goodbye, old man." Scene cut afternoon, truck loaded, engine idling. Amira leaned against the driver's side door. You sure you want to leave it all behind? Ellery looked back at the cabin, the doorway, the shadows, the quiet that finally felt like peace instead of punishment. Yeah, she said softly, some stories don't need to be finished, just understood. They drove until the trees thinned, and the road opened into endless sky. For the first time, Ellery didn't look over her shoulder. Voiceover deepens, quiet background strings begin to swell. They crossed into town by dusk. No uniforms, no rank, just names again. At a small diner off the highway, they stopped for coffee. A young soldier sat at the counter, uniform crisp, eyes bright, too bright, Ellery thought. He kept glancing at her rifle case in the truck through the window. Finally he turned to her. "Ma'am, were you military?" She smiled faintly, once. "What did you do?" She hesitated, then said, "I learned what happens when you stop listening to yourself." He frowned, unsure what she meant. But Amira smiled knowingly. When they left, Ellery slipped something onto the counter beside his cup, an old brass casing, worn smooth with age. Etched into the side, "Ghost keeps watch." Scene fade, evening, quiet lake outside town, reflection of stars. Later, Ellery sat alone by the water. The air was cold, the kind that wakes you up without trying. She watched the surface ripple with each breath of wind. In the reflection, she saw two faces, hers and Colin's, blending into the same faint shimmer before fatting. For years she'd carried his rifle, his lessons, his ghosts. Now all she wanted to carry was the silence he'd never learned to keep. She whispered to the night, "You were wrong about one thing, Colin. Ghosts don't haunt us, we haunt ourselves." The wind stirred, lifting her hair gently across her face as if answering back. She smiled, and for the first time since the war began, the smile reached her eyes. Soft moral closure, voice slows. Music rises to emotional crescendo. Somewhere far away, in another desert, another soldier looked through a scope, steady, silent, patient. And maybe, just maybe, they carried a little of her in the way they breathed before the shot. Because legacy isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the courage to end the pattern. Ellery once believed that fear was her enemy. Now she knew better. Fear was proof she still had something left to lose. She stood, took one last look at the water, and whispered the words her stepfather used to end every lesson with, only this time. She meant them differently. Patience wins the fight, but mercy ends the war. She turned away from the lake, footsteps soft against the gravel. No radio, no orders, no ghosts. Just a woman walking toward the life she'd almost forgotten she had. Final narration, voice-over music fading out, soft moral reflection. In the end, she didn't need to prove his story true. She didn't need to carry his name or his rifle or his guilt. Because sometimes the truest way to honor the fallen is to stop falling with them. And maybe that's all legacy ever is. Not the shots we take, but the silence we finally keep. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.